His own grandfather. I think it's okay.
Yeah.
His own archery teacher, his drona, his guru. And this causes him to have a different attitude, a different viewpoint. Now let's go on and see what happens to Arjuna. Can you hear me okay out there in Zoom land?
Yeah, thank you.
Great. So I think we're on verse 27, Deepa.
26.
26?
Yeah.
All right.
Tatra pashyat sitan partha pitrunnatha pitamahan acharyan matulyan bhratru anputran pautran sakhins tatha shatruran suhrudaschaiva senayorubayorapi tan samikshya sakaunteya sarva bandhuna vasthitan. Then Partha saw stationed there in both the armies fathers, grandfathers, teachers, maternal uncles, brothers, sons, grandsons, and friends too. He saw fathers-in-law and friends also in both the armies. Then the son of Kunti, seeing all these kinsmen, thus standing arrayed, spoke thus sorrowfully, filled with deep pity.
So all of a sudden, Arjuna begins to have doubt. Maybe this war isn't the best idea. So what we're going to see happen in Arjuna is a personality disintegration. So a human being, our equipment, exists essentially at three levels. We have a physical nature, we have an emotional nature, and we have a thought life. Now, according to the Hindu scriptures, our physical nature is driven by the force of our past. The death of the body is karma. Karma means the law of something, the essence of something. What do bodies do? They act. What causes them to act? Essentially, the force of the past. What our nature is. I was at the symphony today. I was having a conversation with my symphony companion, Mauricio. And he was talking about how he was chatting with someone when he was in Mexico about children artists. And he was saying, oh, people fetishize children prodigies and things like that. And I pushed back on him and I said, well, actually, there's more to it than that. If you are going to be a world-class musician, playing at the highest level, you probably are going to start your study at the age of 4 or 5. And frequently, you'll come from a family of musicians. Very, very common. And in the row in front of us, there was a fellow who was overhearing our conversation, talking about it. His wife was playing in the concert. I had to ask. Now, she's world class. She's a member of the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra. That's a world-class orchestra. That's pretty high level. I said, how old was she when she started to play? He said there's photos of her in diapers playing the violin. Her husband, he started violin at 11. That's why he's a dentist.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean you can't be a musician. But you can't be a world-class musician. Occasionally there are exceptions. And it's the same with dance, all sorts of things. So there's something in us that drives us, our nature, our swadharma. Swa means self, dharma means the law. So it's the law of our individual being. So for Arjuna, his swadharma is to be a soldier. Now, the problem is at the level of his feelings. He's doubting. He's holding back. He's full of sorrow, the verse said. Why? These are cousins. This is family over here. What do you do? What do you do? And then we're going to see the third level come in at the level of the intellect, doubt. Should I? Shouldn't I? What's the right choice? Now, let's move this into modern times. Who of you has maybe been applying for a new job? Maybe a little bit of a risk to leave the safe old job. And you don't know, should I take it? Should I not take it? Who's had that kind of doubt? And what do many of us do? We play safe. No, what I have is okay. I'll just do this. Or we become paralyzed. So when this three-part nature of us is disintegrated, frequently the result is paralysis. We're confused as to our duty. What is it we're supposed to do? And we end up doing nothing. So this condition is called Arjuna grief, which is the title of this chapter. We're going to see how it develops. Any thoughts on this before we continue? All right, next verse.
So two together again.
That's all right, just do it.
Yeah,
You did
okay.
less.
Arjun vacha drishtve mam swajanam Krishna yuyutsam samupasthitam sidanti mama gatrani mukham cha parishyati shushati vepatruscha sharire me roma harshascha jayate. Arjuna said, seeing these my kinsmen, O Krishna, arrayed, eager to fight, my limbs fail and my mouth is parched, my body quivers and my hair stand on end.
So Vyasa, our poet, uses a literary device called word painting. Through words, he paints an image of the emotional state of Arjuna. So let's go through these physiological characteristics. What's the first one?
My limbs fail and my mouth is parched.
Yeah, he's weak, his mouth gets dry. Then what happens?
My body quivers.
Yeah, he starts to tremble. And then my favorite, horripilation. Go ahead. His hair stands on it.
My hair stand on end.
So those of you who may be familiar with mental health, what does this sound like? Mike, you work with people. Yeah, anybody out there in Zoom land?
Sounds-
What's it sound like to you?
Anxiety.
Yeah. Fear.
Panic attack.
You got it. All of a sudden, this guy's in trouble. Not a good state for an effective soldier. I come from a military family, generations in the military. And what they do is they send young kids off to boot camp. Boot camp is about breaking down our ordinary notions of ego and helping young men and women be completely dependent on the unit. It becomes a new ego identity. And you train, 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 so that in a combat situation, you don't think. You're not at the effect of your emotional responses. You just act. This is what military training is about. Anybody here studied martial arts? Same thing. You train and train and train so that your body knows what to do. It's impelled into action with the proper stimulus. I'm sure Arjuna had this kind of training. He's a soldier. Sure, they had their equivalent of boot camp in those days. Special forces training. But all of a sudden, because of this disintegration, he's having an anxiety attack, and he's the general. Going on, let's see what happens.
Gandivam samsate hasta tvakchaiva parithyate na cha shaknomyavasthatum brahmativa cha me manaha. The Gandiva bow slips from my hand and my skin burns all over. I am also unable to stand and my mind is whirling around as it were.
So now, because Krishna sees him and he's having the anxiety attack, he's now hit by what the Buddhists call the second arrow. First arrow, my suffering. Second arrow is, I'm a piece of poop because I'm suffering. So he has shame, guilt. He turns red, he's embarrassed. It's so human. This book is maybe 2,500 to 3,000 years old, and you and I have the same reactions. He drops his bow. Now think of a modern situation. These poor Russian soldiers, I'm not making an evaluation of who's the good guys, who's the bad guys. But right now, the Russian conscripts are going into battle in Ukraine with zero training. And I wouldn't be surprised when the artillery starts that they are scared to death. And the Kalashnikovs fall from their hands. The end result is the Russian army is losing between 500 and 700 killed every day. It's incredibly tragic. So now, not only is Arjuna having an anxiety attack, it's feeding on itself, and he can't even hold his weapon. And he can't stand up. He may also be afraid. Again, in the military, there's an old slogan, there are no atheists in a foxhole. Have you ever heard that one before? All right, going on.
There are no atheists in a what?
In a foxhole. That's the hole you dig in the ground so they don't shoot your head off.
Like a trench.
Yeah, like a trench.
Nimittani cha pashyami vipiritani keshava na cha shreyonu pashyami hatva swajana mahave. And I see these adverse omens, O Keshava, nor do I see any good in killing my kinsmen in battle.
So the body is not acting, his emotions have come in, and now, like you and me, the next thing that the intellect does is rationalize. How many times have we not been able to step forward in life? And what we do is come up with all sorts of good rationalizations. Well, I'm not going to get involved with this fellow because 10 years from now, he's probably not going to want children. So therefore, I won't even try. I make so much money, if I get involved with him, he's going to feel guilty in the future that I make more money than he. I won't even go there. All sorts of things. Oh, I'm not going to take this job. It's a big corporation. I'll probably hate it because it's bureaucracy. We may have known people like this or made decisions like this ourselves, where we start to rationalize what's essentially a fear response. Come up with reasons. Or what was the one I heard today? This is a person in recovery. He says, well, I really trust this person who's studying being a shaman in Peru. So I know way back when in AA, they said you shouldn't take, what do they call them? Antidepressants. So I think that's what they're saying about psychedelics now. So I'm going to go do an ayahuasca ceremony. And it's just pure rationalization. What he wants to do is experiment, have an experience, get high. We come up, rationalizations. Any thoughts on this? Very human nature. Then I love that line. He sees omens. Where we look for superstition things. Oh, if I see any black feathers today, I'm not going to do this. Any of you do things like that?
I wait for signs to appear for me to do things.
All right, next verse.
Looks like we're going to talk about this later.
Pardon me?
Looks like we should talk about this later.
Let's go on to the next verse. See if Krishna talks about it.
न काङ्क्षे विजयं कृष्ण न च राज्यं सुखानि च किं नो राजेन गोविन्द किं भोगैर्जीवितेन वा येषामर्थे का का कानिक्षक्तं नो राज्यं भोगा सुखानि च त इमे वस्थिता युद्धे प्रणं त्यक्त्वा धनानि च आचार्या पितरः पुत्रा स्तस्थैव च पितामहा मातुला श्वशुरा पौत्रा शाला सम्बन्धिनस्तथा For I desire not victory, O Krishna, nor kingdom, nor pleasures of what avail. Of what avail is dominion to us, O Govinda? Of what avail are pleasures or even life itself? They for whose sake we desire kingdom, enjoyment, and pleasures stand here in battle, having renounced life and wealth. Teachers, fathers, sons, and also grandfathers, maternal uncles, fathers-in-law, grandsons, brothers-in-law, and other relatives.
So now he starts to talk about what I would call false humility, false spirituality. Oh, I'm not ambitious. Oh, I don't want to be victorious and have the glory. No, I don't really want that. What avail is it for me to fight this war when my dear relatives are over there? Now, note, what has he lost sight of? The Kauravas are not the rightful rulers, and they're doing a crappy job of it. Arjuna's duty is to establish righteousness. So what has he done? He has lost sight of the goal, of the purpose. So for you and me, what happens? We have a particular duty or intention in life. Because of our fear, our anxiety, and because of our rationalizations, we lose sight of the goal. Let me give you another real live example. So I had a young man I was working with, and he had a college degree from a school back in the East Coast, and in performing arts. He was a fantastic singer. And he was living at home, and he had a job up at on Holy Hill at the Graduate Theological Union with one of the schools there as a school administrator. And he was bored, he hated his life, and he felt like he was just existing and going. He had all these rationalizations. Well, it's free living with my mother, and this is a good, safe job. I asked him a question I do to many young people. If you were independently wealthy, if you had all the education and opportunity in the world, what would you be doing with your life? He didn't miss a beat. He said, I'd sing. You know, Jim, well, why the hell aren't you? Well, you know, I'm waiting till I make enough money and I'm financially independent, so then I can go do that. Now wait a minute. The end is the means in a different form. If you're a school administrator and you do that for 20 years, guess what you're going to be in 20 years? You're not going to be a singer. You're going to be a much better school administrator. How do you become a singer? The end is the means in a different form. You've got to do the means to achieve the end. And he took the risk, and he moved through his fear and his anxiety. And now he's a working professional actor. He got a full scholarship to a master's program at a school in the East Coast, working in multimedia performing arts. He's connected into New York. I wouldn't be surprised if he's on Broadway in another year. But what did he do? He had to move through his fear and act according to his swadharma. Antithetically, I have another dear friend who always really wanted to do music and theater, but instead went to school and got a degree in finance, in accounting. And he did that for decades and really hated it. So when he retired, he'd spent most of his money because trying to get away from his crappy life. And now in his 70s, he's trying to do amateur theater. Do you realize how hard it is to memorize a script when you're 77? I mean, I'm glad he's doing it. But this is a case of someone who did not follow their swadharma. And what did he get after 20, 30 years? Well, he was a good finance guy. So we're going to work on this idea of what Joseph Campbell called following your bliss. Riding the horse in the direction it's going. Doing what comes naturally. But Arjuna here is moving away his swadharma, which is as a soldier, and his duty, which is to establish righteousness. It's different for each one of us, but the principle is the same. Any questions about this? Going on.
एतान् न हन्तुमिच्छामि अज्ञतोऽपि मधुसूदन अपि त्रैलोक्यराज्यस्य हेतो किं नु मही कृते. These I do not wish to kill, though they may kill me. O Madhusudana, even for the sake of dominion over the three worlds, how much less for the sake of the earth.
So here again, more rationalization, trying to be a goody-goody and look good in his own eyes. I don't want to kill them, even if they kill me. More rationalization. Next verse.
Nihatya dhartarashtrana ka priti sa janardana papamevashraye desman ye dasman hantave tanatadagina. Killing these sons of Dhritarashtra, what pleasure can be ours, O Janardana? Sin alone will be our gain by killing these felons.
Now, this is one of the areas of the conversation that I just love. You would be surprised how many people come to me. And what they want to do is lecture me on why following the suggestions of yoga won't work for them. Very, very interesting situation. Notice what Krishna's doing. He's just quiet. He's letting Arjuna unload. So he's done something many, many gurus do, which is poke. Triggered Arjuna. And out all this stuff comes. That's what many of us do. We come up with rationalizations and then try to convince people, including a teacher. Thoughts going on.
Tasman narha vayam hantum dhartarashtran swabandhan bandhavan swajanam hi katham hatva sukhina syama madhava. Therefore we shall not kill the sons of Dhritarashtra, our relatives, for how can we be happy by killing our own people, O Madhava?
So he has now made the decision, I'm not going to do it. And he says, because I won't be happy. What happened to priorities? To put it in modern language. Well, Jim, I can't practice Vairagya. I won't get my needs met. You don't know about my needs. I have all these needs. That's the term people use. They dress up desire. These are my needs. So what is he concerned about now? His own selfishness. I won't be happy if I kill them. Certainly no longer about duty. It's very interesting. To my knowledge, there is no Sanskrit word for the concept of rights. But there's a whole lot about dharma. It's usually translated as duty. But it's not like the British stiff upper lip, I'm going to do my duty. It's more about being a righteous person, having the warrior spirit, having integrity, acting ethically, doing what's appropriate in a situation. It's not about being concerned, am I happy? See if we can use a more modern example. Do we have anybody here who's got kids? Or you may have relatives with children. So, do mommies always love walking crying children or cleaning butts or washing smelly, dirty diapers? Does that really thrill them? Yes, you love your babies, but there are times when it's just awful and you do it anyway because of your love of your children, and it's your duty as a parent. So a couple of you have your own businesses, and it's payroll time. And all of a sudden, the bank account's getting slim. And maybe you have fear, oh my God, our cash reserve is getting low. And the idea says, I just won't pay my employees this month. Do you do that? Yes, no?
Yeah.
Why not?
You have a duty to them.
Yes. Yeah. So Arjun has lost sight of duty. I won't be happy. Going on.
यद्यपि ते न पश्यन्ति लोभोपहत चेतसा कुलक्षय कृतं दोषं मित्रद्रोहे च पातकम् कथं न ज्ञेयमस्माभिः आपादस्मानि वर्तितुं कुलक्ष्य कृतं दोषं प्रपश्यद्भिर्जनार्दन. Through these, with their intelligence clouded by greed, see no evil in the destruction of the families in the society, and no sin in their cruelty to friends.
So now he's getting very moralistic. All of a sudden, he's worried about the destruction of the family. If we fight this war, things will fall apart. Probably the best, somewhat modern example of this attitude is we could say, what was the name of the British Prime Minister who attempted appeasement with Hitler?
Chamberlain.
Chamberlain, that's right. Peace in our time. And I'm sure he had a rationale for it. Wasn't very effective. Didn't stop the Blitz from coming to Britain. But we can make poor decisions and then rest them up in rationalization. Now, Chamberlain is just another example of the human condition. There's a Chamberlain in all of us. Have you or I ever compromised our integrity in order to just get by? We have another real live example. I was talking with a friend in Florida who lives in West Palm, and he's a volunteer usher at the Kravitz Theater there, where they bring all sorts of shows in. He gets to see all these shows for free because he's an usher. Well, there was a golf pro, I don't know the person's name, I'm sure he told me, but I forgot, who's now doing a stand-up comic routine. And the guy's routine was filled with racist jokes, misogynist jokes, homophobic jokes. My friend was profoundly offended by it. And I said, well, why don't you say something or do something? Oh, I can't do that. I might get fired. Isn't that an interesting, very human response? but a fear response, losing sight of righteousness. What's correct action? Silence in the face of injustice is complicity. Many of us know it. All right, going on.
There's one more English section.
Oh, yeah, what?
Why shouldn't we, who clearly see evil in the destruction of the family units, learn to turn away from the sin of Janathan?
So he's kind of fixating on this preservation of the family unit. He's lost sight of the larger picture about the righteousness of the war. And he's saying, what we really should do is turn away from this battle so that families do not get destroyed. Going on.
Kulakshaye pranashyanti kuladharma sanatana dharme nashte kulam kritsna madharmo vivatyuta. In the destruction of a family, the immemorial religious rights of that family perish. On the destruction of spirituality, impiety overcomes the whole family.
So if we have this problem of the destruction of families, the breakdown, then the religious rituals won't get done. People will lose their piety, their religiosity. And society will break down. We're not doing the rituals right. Losing sight of deeper ethical values. Mike and I have talked a lot about Holy Mother Catholic Church, about how frequently we see structures that focus on ritual, which is like a cover-up for power and secrets, and lose the gospel message. Is that a good way to put language to it?
Yes.
So he's having the same kind of focus here. Going on.
Adharma bhivavat Krishna pratyushyanti kulastriya srishu dushtasu varshneya jayate varna sankaraha. By the prevalence of impiety, O Krishna, the women of the family become corrupt, and women being corrupted, O descendant of the Vishnu clan, there arises intermingling of castes.
Oh my God, we've got interracial marriages happening. Isn't that just terrible? Oops. If society breaks down, then our comfortable social structures might perish. We have this huge wave, for example, in this country, of certain elements of white people who have as an idea like race replacement. They are terrified about the browning of America. By 2050, sociologists say, the United States will be a majority minority country. White people will no longer be the majority. Thank God. But it terrifies some people. And then they dress it up, culture, values. Arjun's really kind of stuck in the same place. Now there's a word that's used here, varna. Varna is the Sanskrit word for caste. Varna also means color, just like the English word caste or hue can mean color. So we will go into this more at a later time. But just like in the United States, our national original sin is slavery. One of the great national cultural burdens of India is the caste system. It has been bent, it has been perverted, and it has been used as a way to keep privileged groups of people in power for thousands of years. Swamiji fought tirelessly against it. So we are not the only country here in the United States that has a national challenge with this. And it's right here implied in the attitude of Arjuna. Oh my God, we're going to have the interracial, we're going to have mixed marriages, intercaste marriages. Any thoughts on this? God forbid, everything's going to fall apart if that happens.
He's saying that if he fights or if they fight, that's going to be a result. Why?
That's his rationalization. Rationalizations are frequently not rational. But it's revealing. It's revealing his prejudices. So they come up.
It also means that the men will be dead and hence the women will be basically without moral reigning in.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they're going to become loose women. They might even get jobs. They might even run for Congress. God forbid. They might even become corporate executives. See, these issues are not new. Going on.
Sankaro narakayev kulagnanan kulasya cha patanti pitaro yesham luptapindodakakriya. Confusion of castes leads the slayer of the family to hell, for their forefathers fall, deprived of the offerings of pinda, rice balls, and water libations.
So here what's important to Arjuna is that the ancestors get their rice balls. They get propitiated. Many cultures have ancestor worship, and I'm not saying that this is not something that can be rich. But there's a difference between focusing on ritualism rather than the deep message of spirituality, which I think is one of the reasons we find so many churches emptying out in our modern society here in the West. Because they're not touching people's lives. They're all caught up in formalism rather than something that's good news. Now, all of this started with Arjuna having an anxiety attack. And where he's ended up is the reason I will not fight is so that the ancestors can get their rice balls.
Must be really good rice balls.
And the Hindus do this now. Did you do, any of you do a ritual? What's it called, Vinayak? I think you did this for your father, didn't you? What's the ritual with the pinda called?
Pindran.
Yeah. And you cast it into the water, correct? Yeah. It's done even today. It's a beautiful and meaningful ritual. But that's not the most important thing in society. If unrighteousness prevails, maybe you can postpone that ritual for a bit. Take care of something that's more important. Going on.
Doshairete Kulagnanam Varna Sankara Karake Utsadhyante Jati Dharma Kuladharmashcha Chashvata. By these evil deeds of the destroyers of the family, which cause confusion of castes, the eternal religious rights of the caste and the family are destroyed.
So, if all this takes place, if I fight this war, all our religious rituals will break down. It's going to be my fault. So he's come up with a rationale, makes perfectly good sense, to not do his duty. He's lost sight of the larger picture. Going on.
Sanna Kuladharmana Manushyanam Janardana Narake Niyatam Vaso Bhavititya Nushruma. We have heard of Janardana that is inevitable for those men in whose families the religious practices have been destroyed to dwell in hell for an unknown period of time.
And I just love it that he's lecturing the avatar God on religious rights. I just think that's very funny. Very, very funny. So again, he's caught up in rationalization. Continue.
Aho bata mahat papam kartum yavasita vayam yadraja sukhalubhena hantum swadhanam udyataha. Alas, we are involved in a great sin, in that we are prepared to kill our kinsmen from greed for the pleasures of the kingdom.
No, Arjuna. That's not why you're fighting this war. It's not out of greed. It's not out of pleasure. And by the way, you said you weren't doing it for greed and pleasure. You're doing it because it's a righteous cause. So he's completely lost the larger picture. And he's not all worried about his ego, needs, and desires. Going on.
Sorry, I was thinking of a question.
Please.
Then I lost track of the question in my head, so I'll come back to it. Yadi mama pratikara mashastram shastrapanaya dhartarashtrarane hanyu sanme kshemataram bhavet. If the sons of Dhritarashtra, weapons in hand, slay me in battle, unresisting and unarmed, that would be better for me.
Like that's really gonna happen. This is a true story. So many years ago, I had a friend, a fellow disciple of Swamiji, who was Mexican. And his father was a Mexican attorney, and this young man had just passed the bar in Mexico. And he said, I sat there and watched this conversation. He said, Swamiji, the legal system in Mexico, and I don't know if it still is, but at the time that this young man was practicing, is quite corrupt. So if I have a client that I'm representing, and in order for him to win his case, I need to bribe the judge, should I do it? What do you think Swamiji's answer was?
To whom is your duty?
Hmm?
To whom is your duty?
Well, yes. So who do you think his duty was?
To his client.
Yes. Pay the judge. Now, if you don't like the system, you don't have to be a lawyer. You can withdraw. But you don't do it in the middle of the trial when you have a duty to the client. Do you see that? You don't assuage your own conscience and make your client suffer because of it. So here Arjuna, he's already made the commitment. He's the commander-in-chief of the Pandava army. He didn't decide to take sannyas years ago. He's thinking about now, because it's tough. But you had exactly the right question, Daniel. To whom is your duty? That's the vision Arjuna's lost. Going on,
Actually, can I ask the question?
please.
So this happened recently to me. Someone very close to me was telling me about how when they were younger and I just graduated, they weren't finding jobs, and to get a competitive advantage, they thought that it was very valid for them to add credentials to their resume that they didn't have.
Mhm.
And she said that most people are afraid that companies are going to do background checks, but they never do. And frankly, they don't care if you completed the course as long as you can answer the questions they're asking you. And then she goes on to say that her spouse wouldn't do this. And she finds it really weird that he can't be selfish enough or self-preserving enough to do it when needed. And she said that she's very comfortable with lying. And then, so when the question of to whom your duty is, there is sort of an implied duty towards ourselves. And I was wondering, like, I mean, I might not be able to do this myself, but then I found myself judging this person who's very close to me. And then I just went into a quandary, like, what should my stance be here? Like, I don't know how to assess this anymore, because she was doing it for self-preservation in some way.
Mhm. Well, not necessarily self-preservation, for self-advancement. I mean, if she didn't have the credentials, I don't know. If she had told the truth, would she have gotten the job? That's the question.
She might not have made it to the top of the list of the recruiters, right?
Who knows? That's a maybe. I can only share with you my view on it. my view on it, and this is only a spiritual notion, the energy you put out will come back to you. As yogis, we understand we don't get away with anything in life. The Hebrew Bible says, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. It doesn't mean God punishes us. We are not punished for our sins. We are punished by them. So I guarantee you, if she has no problem lying and she lies a lot, she will be lied to. It's an absolute inevitability. It's cosmic law. She doesn't mind that. You know, oh yes, we value women just like we do men. We're going to pay you equally, and it's a bold-faced lie. I don't know what will happen, but it always comes back. So a yogi endeavors to lead a life of integrity, not because they're a goody-goody, because it's just an intelligent way to live. So what do you do when you're in conversation with them? What I would do is say, well, this is my view, this is what works for me, so I have peace of mind. I'm not sure I would go forward and say, you should do blah, 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 blah. That's by and large not a particularly useful mode of communication. What's the saying? Unsolicited advice is usually interpreted as criticism. But one of the things that I know about all of us human beings is we all have foibles. If she's basically a good person, I would dump the friendship because of it. I don't know if that's useful.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, the question really comes from, I know that, the Gita is supposed to help us in a way, like we relate to the Gita because we end up in a situation like Arjun where we're driven by fear or paralyzed by what lies ahead of us. But there is no true equivalent of going to war, or maybe I'm not creative enough to think about it, but what is the true equivalent of this contemporary? Like, I'm just trying to relate a little more to Arjuna's situation.
Well, in this relationship, would you hold back from telling your truth because you were afraid she'd reject you?
No.
Now, it's one thing to offer unsolicited advice, but if she were to openly say, what do you think about me lying and padding and fluffing a resume? Would you lie back to her? Say, oh, I think it's fine.
No.
Yeah. So, you do the righteous thing. And it might be uncomfortable. Might hurt her feelings. But what's the guy's name? George Santos? He certainly did get ahead so far, totally lying about his resume. The Republican congressman from New York. Boy, is it coming back to bite him. So I don't know what will happen to this young lady. But for us yogis, the reason we act with integrity is it just makes life simpler. We are not punished for our sin. We are punished by our sin. I climb up to the roof of the building and have the crazy idea I can jump off and nothing's going to happen. I jump off and I splat on the sidewalk. Gravity isn't punishing me. The sidewalk isn't punishing me. I'm being punished because I did a stupid thing. I will splat on the sidewalk. And people's ignorance of the law of cause and effect, the law of karma, does not keep it from operating. Is that useful?
Yeah.
Very good question. And the loving thing to do may be to talk about this with her, not to judge her because you care about her, because it will come back. She says nobody checks until they do. All right, going on.
Sanjay Vacha Eva Muktvajuna Sankhe Pratopastha Upavishat Visrujya Sasharam Japam Shokasam Vigna Manasaha. Sanjaya said, having thus spoken in the midst of the battlefield, Arjuna sat down on the seat of the chariot, casting away his bow and arrow, with a mind distressed with sorrow.
So the end result of all this is this disintegration of the personality. So his nature is to be a soldier. His karma has placed him in the midst of this incredibly important and righteous war. We're not going to go into the idea of just or unjust war. Just see it from its historical context here. He gets emotionally engaged and involved, which results in fear and anxiety. And all of a sudden he loses sight of the larger picture and he's dealing with I, me, mine, my happiness. And then he has doubt coming in and his mind comes up with rationalizations. The end result is paralysis. He sits down in the chariot and will not fight. And for you and me, one of the things that can be a very valuable exercise is to write down a fear list and examine how fear works in our minds. Things like, I'm afraid of intimacy and I'm afraid of being alone. I'm afraid of being controlled and I'm afraid of responsibility. I'm afraid of success. I'm afraid of failure. Are you getting what I'm talking about? These double binds that we psychologically put ourselves in. And the end result is non-action. It's paralysis. It's getting stuck. I always think about the woman who's in an abusive relationship and she goes to the counselor and he beats me and he's so terrible, blah, 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 blah. And the counselor says, have you thought of leaving him? He says, I can't do that. We just got a brand new washer and dryer. I'm not making this stuff up. If any of you have ever been in an abusive relationship, you know that it can be very hard to leave. The mind comes up with rationalizations for staying. There's so many worldly examples where we're in the state of Arjuna grief. All right, we need to stop here. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om.
Hey, Jim, it was also the last shloka of the chapter, so the Upanishad, do you want me to read it today or do you want me to do it
Sure,
next?
go ahead.
Om Tatsariti Srimad Bhagwad Gita Supanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjun Samvade Arjun Vishad Yogo Nama Prathamo Dhyayaha. Thus, in the Upanishads of the glorious Bhagwad Gita, in the science of the eternal, in the scripture of yoga, in the dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjuna, the first discourse ends entitled The Yoga of the Arjuna Grief.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.